Hey, everybody, you're listening to Restauranttopia. I'm really excited about this episode. This is an avenue we haven't really explored before. I have Andrew Harris here from the Summit County Health Department. Andrew, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
I can't complain, man. Listen, we're really excited to have you on. We've done consultative podcasts around every topic in the industry except for this very one. And thank you so much for being on today. I know you have a busy schedule and lots to do. But man, let's get down to it. Let's talk about safety and sanitation in the restaurant industry.
Imagine a perfect world where you can build a restaurant, open the doors, and make loads of money. Unfortunately, those days are over. It takes great leadership, hard work, and long hours to operate a successful restaurant. Together, we can make it happen. This is Restauranttopia.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about your background, Andrew. How did you get into being a sanitarian by trade?
So I cooked for just about 10 years, had a little place out in Denver and didn't do very well, obviously, or I wouldn't be sitting here in Ohio. But I think that helps. It gives me a different perspective than some of my coworkers, and it certainly makes me appreciate how hard the folks in the industry work and how hard their day-to-day job really is. Because I don't think a lot of people understand that.
You hit on something there because I had a similar kind of, I guess, point in my career where we opened a new restaurant, a friend and I, and it just failed miserably. For a year and a half. We just failed, right? And during that time, it was the worst experience I ever had. But coming out of it, it opened so many doors and it taught me so much. So it sounds like you had something similar happen to you with that restaurant in Colorado, right?
It did, yeah.
I think it's important for someone like yourself to have that perspective, right? To you understand the rigors of the job. You understand what it takes to not only get food out in a timely manner, right? To please your guests, but then how to do so cleanly, right? Not so easy in the middle of the rush.
Yeah. Cleanly and safely. Yeah. And sometimes that can be difficult to do.
Yeah, a little bit, man. I spent my whole time doing it, right? It's like how many times, like every second of downtime you have, you're wiping down your station or you're changing out your sandy bucket or you're doing something, right? So,
well hopefully.
Yeah, true story, right? I guess if everybody did that, you wouldn't be employed, right? You wouldn't have a job.
Yeah, we definitely have part of our job working with facilities is that, we're all kind of on the same team. And so I really want to see facilities do well, and I want them to understand if they're not doing something correctly, if all of my facilities that I inspect, if they all go out of business, and I don't really have a job either. So it's important for me to keep them in business.
That's kind of where we're at, right? Like if the independent restaurant doesn't do well, we're not employed, right? We don't have anybody to sell anything to. So we're in the same boat, bro.
So on top of them keeping the public safe, we want to see them do a good job. I want to see them succeed. And we're really I'm another set of eyes. I'm there to help.
You're an educator.
Exactly. And that is what it's about.
Sometimes right. But I don't know that every restaurant understands that though.
I really don't think that they do. Sometimes those relationships, they seem more adversarial than they really need to be. But I think that if they would understand that we're really just another set of eyes, sometimes when I get up in the morning, just like yourself and the restaurant owners and all the people that work there, when we get up in the morning, I don't think anybody says, boy, I'm going to see how many people I can make sick today. I mean, that's stupid. Nobody says that.
Right.
When they get up in the morning, you hit the ground running. And so before you even get to the back door of the restaurant, you already have going through your head what you need to do for the day. And so those blinders go on, you get in there and you just start banging stuff out. Well, if somebody comes into a facility and they're pointing out things that aren't right or could use some improvement, I don't think that they're necessarily picking on an individual. It's just that it's sort of tough to see the forest when you're standing in the trees. So that extra set of eyes is really just trying to help bring that person out of the forest so that they can see the trees. And then you have an educational moment. If they really don't understand, then that gives us an opportunity to interact and then hopefully to explain what needs to be fixed or why it needs to be fixed, and then we just go on from there. When you're deep in the day-to-day operation of your business and just going like crazy, sometimes it's tough to see stuff because it didn't just happen overnight, especially with dirt. You leave the one night, dirt fairies don't come in the middle of the night and throw dirt all over the place.
Are you sure about that? Because I'm pretty sure they do. That's what happened to me anyway.
Maybe they do, but it's one speck at a time. And until
Yep.
somebody pulls you out and says, "Hey, this could use a little cleaning, or this could use some improvement," it's just hard to see those things when you're right in it. If
No question.
I took a restaurant owner and took them to the place down the street and said, "Hey, point out 10 things to me that are wrong in this facility," it would take them about 30 seconds.
Yeah, that objective
And they'd-
perspective is
and they'd
pretty powerful.
And they'd be brutal.
Yeah.
They'd be like, "Well, that's wrong. That's wrong. Can't do that."
Mhm.
But in your own place, it's a lot more difficult to see that.
Well, it's like judging your own kids, right?
It is.
Yeah, it can be tough sometimes.
It really
Sometimes-
is. And
Sometimes owners and operators are overly critical, much like parents, and sometimes they have that halo bias, and so they don't think of anything doing wrong. But to your point too, if they're hitting the ground running and they're midstream and they got 50 things going on, and then someone like you stops by, taps on their shoulder, says, "Hey, I need to borrow some time. We're going to look at these things," right? I can only imagine that breeds a little turmoil.
it can, and that's part of it too, because our inspections, they're surprise inspections. We generally don't schedule those. We just show up unannounced and say, "Howdy, we're here." And at least when I was working in the restaurant business, if you have somebody call off, I mean, your day is instantly, it goes from crazy busy to worse in a hurry.
And
And
as
then
you know,
you
we're
get
dealing with a
somebody that
tremendous
walks
amount
through
of that.
Yeah, and then you get somebody from our agency that drops in and says, "Hi, we're here to stroll around for a couple of hours."
And criticize you. Right?
Yeah. And I don't care how nice we are. We make people nervous.
Yeah, sure.
For whatever reason. And
Well,
that's not why
I can
we're
tell you why. It's because you're feeling judged, right? Because
right.
it's
And we're not there
level of
we're not
insecurity.
there to make people nervous, but we
Right.
do.
Yeah, of course. Just by nature, you do, I think. And it's much
Sure.
like a lot of times I use the analogy in the classes I teach is it's you guys, unfortunately, are positioned in much like the police, right? Where it's like it's sometimes it's inconvenient to follow the law verbatim, right? Like, you're going 30 and a 25 because that's going to get you that place 2 minutes quicker. And you're going to get called out on it, but you don't want to. You look at the individual who's going to hold you accountable as the adversary, and then it generates nervousness and a little bit of angst, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah. But I learned, maybe, gosh, it had to be 2008. There were some neurovirus outbreaks in Northeast Ohio. I'm not sure if you remember here in Kent, Ohio, we had one, right? At a chain burrito place had a big neurovirus outbreak. And everybody was becoming very, very sensitive to that. And my health inspector at the time, I was working in Beechwood, and she came in and she kept coming in and kept coming in. And I was getting a little agitated with her. And I'm like, "Look, like, I don't know what you want from me. Like, I'm doing my best here." And what I realized is she wanted to educate me. But me being the young chef full of chutzpah and I know everything, and I wasn't trying to be educated. And it wasn't until I had this eureka moment that I'm like, dang, I just need to give her a soapbox so she can teach me what she wants to teach me. And I did, because again, it wasn't that I was smart. It was that I was annoyed to the point that I couldn't help but do so. And so I'm trying not to give myself credit here, right? So I had her come in and do a staff training on a Saturday. And then I realized the power of that and how jazzed she was to train. And her and our relationship changed dramatically after that. All of a sudden, we became what you called partners. And I didn't mind seeing her. Like, when she walked through the front door, I didn't stall her anymore, right? I didn't have my manager go out and chat her up just so we could cover up all our drinks and wash our hands and put gloves on and all, the drill when restaurants do when you walk in, right?
Yep.
So it wasn't about that anymore. It was about letting her into my world and allowing her to leverage her knowledge and her expertise into my improvement.
Yep.
It changed things dramatically, man. But again, it changed. And it wasn't until that point that I realized you guys are merely health consultants. And then when I looked at it through that lens, it was like, man, okay, come in and teach me stuff. Show me what I'm doing wrong. Help me improve, right?
Yep. And I think that most people, I think that they want to. Again, I don't think that anybody's trying to make somebody sick. I don't think they show up saying, "How bad of a job can I do today?" I think that everybody wants to do a good job and they want to do the right thing. If they're doing something that's not correct, they want to do the right thing. And I think that people they're willing to learn and they're willing to do the right thing. It's just sometimes how you approach that and how you get that message through to them. Then the people that refuse to do the right thing, there's there's avenues, there's ways to take care of that. But those people are really, they're few and far between. Most people, I think, want to do a good job. And most restaurateurs and people that are involved in the industry, other than maybe somebody where it's a first time job, or maybe they're a college student and they're just trying to earn a couple of bucks and they're just doing it for fun or for whatever reason. Most people that are in the industry, they're career people, and this is what's in their blood, and this is what they're going to do. And they take a lot of pride in that, and they want to do the right thing. And so when you approach it more like a teaching moment, I just think it's a win-win for everybody. I think if you come in there guns blazing, I am the law,
like Yosemite Sam, right?
Right. That nobody wins. It doesn't,
Yeah.
And I think that this industry, they made that movement years ago where moving towards more education rather than just going in with a big stick and trying to whack people.
That's it.
That doesn't do anything. And nobody learns. Nobody, they're not going to do anything right if you're just in there beating them up and telling them they're doing something wrong and yelling. So you go in and we have a teachable moment.
Yeah, that essentially it's like, you keep failing the test, but the teacher never went over the lesson plans.
Exactly.
Right? You didn't have any lectures, you didn't have any activities, but then you just keep getting the test and failing, right? So it can be frustrating for operators.
Yeah, you get the test back and you got a bunch of stuff wrong, but you don't get to know the right answer. And then you just move on to the next thing.
Right. It's not very productive
in that scenario.
Correct. No, I love that. So what do you see in this day and age? Obviously, you guys have had a very eventful few years, if I can only imagine. Like, I know it was tough for restaurants. I can't imagine what it was like for you guys regulating and upholding the letter of the recommendation or the letter of the law throughout the pandemic, right? But now that you're basically, I wouldn't say we're on the other end of it because the damn thing keeps lurking around, right? But now that we're mostly through it, are you guys like getting your feet again? Are you back to mostly normal stuff? Or what are you guys seeing out there today?
Mostly we're getting back to normal stuff. A lot of restaurants right now, they're having some difficulties staffing. Some are, some aren't. It's kind of hit and miss. But for the most part, our work, we're getting back to where we were inspection wise. We have less staff that's been pulled doing other things. So we're, for the most part, back to full strength. Restaurants that we're inspecting, many of the things that we see before, our biggest concerns are really still the biggest concerns, and it's still the same issues, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, basically the same stuff.
It's always people, isn't it? Right. And I teach a similar class as we discussed before we started recording. I do a lot of serve safe training and stuff like that. And people were always shocked to find out they're the most dangerous thing in the kitchen. They always think it's chicken, or they always think it's the ground beef or whatever the case may be. But it's like, no, you got to look in the mirror here. It's you, right?
It is. Well, the biggest thing they need to understand about just basic food safety is proper hand washing.
We learned that at a rapid pace for the last 2 years, right? Hand washing was everything.
And I think that that's one of the things that coming out of the pandemic that is actually a huge plus. Because it's kind of crazy, because of my job, I suppose I pay attention to people washing their hands. Mm-hmm. And it's really amazing. Even when I'm just out to eat and you'll see, these, guys leave the restroom, they didn't wash their hands, and then you see them out in the dining room, and they're sitting there with their family and the guy's buddy and their family, and they're eating nachos or something gooey, and it's just like, oh my God, really? It's crazy the number of people that don't wash their hands. But at least the pandemic, that really forced people to be super vigilant about hand washing, sanitizer, hand sanitizer use, it has its place. It doesn't replace hand washing, but at the very least, people are also, going crazy with that stuff. So even if they're not washing their hands, they're going overboard with the hand sanitizer. So, I'll take it as a win. But
that's a true story. It's better than nothing, right?
Exactly. But I think the pandemic really did help with that and helped with people washing their hands. One of the other biggest things I see still, and it's just a problem across the board, not only in restaurants, but just people in their homes, especially when they're serving food to people outside their family, is bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods. And people just understanding that if you just don't touch something with your bare hands, it's going to go right in somebody's mouth. a whole lot less people are going to get sick.
Yeah. True story.
You know, if it's your immediate family, then chances are whatever I've got, my wife has or my daughter has or whatever. But once you get outside that little circle, you know, you really don't want to touch stuff that's going to go right in somebody's mouth.
Right.
And I think if people would start to understand that, just like the hand washing thing, you just have so many less people getting sick.
True story. You know, gloves, and that's what you're talking about with ready to eat foods, right? Is you need to wear the single use gloves. And that may be one of my biggest pet peeves in the industry is the abuse of gloves, right? It's almost like I was at a restaurant on Saturday, as a matter of fact, great place, amazing owner, but he was wearing gloves the entire time. So he's wearing gloves when he's checking people out. He's wearing gloves when he's pulling chairs out to seat guests. And I'm just looking like, why though? Like, no, don't wear that. Like, take them off, right? Like, your hands feel nice and clean, but your gloves are absolutely filthy. So please don't go back and grab a sandwich. And no, Andrew, I can't tell you where the place is. I apologize.
Well, no, that's the one of the things with the whole bare hand contact thing is needing to provide a barrier. So whether that's gloves, tongs, deli tissues, chopsticks, toothpicks, whatever, just so long as you're not touching it with your bare hands. That is one of the problem with gloves, is because most people gravitate towards gloves because it's the easiest thing for them to do. But then they put the gloves on and then they don't change them.
Right.
And then they're doing all kinds of goofy things. People don't understand that they're wearing the gloves to protect the food from them, not them from their hands getting gooey.
We're a little egocentric, aren't we?
Right. Well, then that's when you run into the kid that he puts on the gloves and then you see him out there, sweeping the parking lot. And then he comes back in and makes your club sandwich.
Yeah. I'm never ordering that club sandwich again, man.
No.
That was it's always my thing in the classes that I teach too, is I'm very adamant about glove use, especially with ready to eat foods, especially during a pandemic, right? We have all these germs and pathogens flying around. But I don't think people realize is there's so many, especially with the big 6 pathogens, right? Whether it's norovirus or salmonella or salmonella typhi or E. coli or any of those, is that you can be asymptomatic and still pass these things on. And I believe is it norovirus for weeks, you can be contagious with no symptoms. Weeks.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. You're still passing
that's
stool for weeks.
Right. And that's the thing in your stool. And that's what I don't think we realize as humans is that we're not 100% efficient at using the restroom, right? Because there's so much going on as far as germs and microscopic organisms that we absolutely cannot see or feel. And so we like to think we're efficient. We like to think we're clean, but man, do we need to take those extra measures all the time to make sure as such, right? Because again, things like norovirus are nasty and they catch on like wildfire.
They do. Using the restroom in personal hygiene, individuals' personal hygiene habits aside, after using a restroom, your hands are difficult to clean. I mean, just hand washing in general is a lot harder than people think. So for your students, you probably do a demonstration using the goo is that you put on your hands, and then you shine the black light on there and your hands glow, and then you wash so the glow germ, you wash your hands and then you see where you missed and stuff like that. Your hands are very, very difficult to clean. And that's why surgeons scrub, and then they still put on gloves. So after using a restroom, if I've been sick with norovirus, it takes very, very few of those organisms to make you sick. When your hands are so difficult to clean to begin with, you then go into the kitchen and you make something and, inadvertently you stick your hands in the potato salad or something. I don't know. And then all of a sudden, we get a whole bunch of people sick and it's tough to figure out why.
Of course, especially if they're asymptomatic, right? They're not feeling anything. They have nothing reported or anything else. So I think, go ahead.
Well, that's the problem with norovirus, right? So that 24-hour flu. So you got to come in and go on for both ends for the better part of a day. And then 24 hours later, you feel like $1 million. And so, you stayed home, you did the right thing, but that's because you couldn't get off the couch or out of your bed.
Or off the toilet.
Right. But then the next day you feel better and you're like, okay, well, I've got bills to pay. I've got to keep a roof over my head and keep clothing on my kids' backs. So you go into work because you feel better. But then at that point, you're asymptomatic. You're still passing the virus, but you feel perfectly fine. And then people just don't realize that you pass that for weeks afterwards. And then it's really easy to see how when you couple that then with bare hand contact with ready to eat food that other people get sick. you know?
I think that's a reality that a lot of people aren't ready to face, is that at any point in time, we have a certain number of micrograms of feces on our hands at all point in times, right? Like everybody out there has it, but people are mortified to find it, like, who, me? No, not me. And it's like, well, listen, you can't eliminate these pathogens. You can only mitigate these pathogens, whether washing or sanitizing or cooking. You can never truly eliminate them. And I think looking through that lens, you all of a sudden realize, like, hey, this is something that can be really dangerous, and I need to do everything I can to control this.
Right. No, absolutely.
You know, so we think we just cook something to 165 and everything's dead, and it's like, that's not always the case, you know?
Not always. That's
Right.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. What else are you seeing out there, Andrew?
Cold holding. You know, if one of my pet peeves, and probably part of having worked in the industry, this being especially one of those things that kind of bothers me. But if I go into a facility and they're having an issue with a cold holding unit, say the prep table, and I'm the person that's telling them that they've got a problem with that unit, that the food's out of temperature, super irritating. I don't know what the owner is paying the people for that are working there. If I'm the person that's coming in and telling them that they've got a problem. But really, when we do these visits and we pop in only a couple times a year, we're really only getting a snapshot of what you're doing. So when you mentioned before where you have the manager or somebody tie us up out front while you're running around in the back covering stuff up and doing things like that. Okay,
yeah, you know that happens, right? Can we just put that on the record? Like,
yeah, we know
everyone in your position is aware of that move, just so you know. So operators out there, you are not fooling anybody.
Right.
It's blatantly obvious when every single staff member has a fresh pair of gloves on and they're holding their hands up like surgeons. Yeah, that's not reality, right? Like, we know that. Like, stop.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's not, yeah. So you're not fooling us, but it's not tough to fool us, okay. So, but when we come in and I find something like that, that's like, well, how am I the person, telling you that this is a problem? You should be going around doing daily temperature checks and stuff like that. And it's completely different if I go to a facility and they're having an issue with their prep table. And before I even start, they're like, hey, you know what? Before you get going, that prep table's not working. But this is what we're doing. I've got limited amounts of product in that table. I've got it on ice. I've already placed a service call. We're only going to keep products in it during the busiest part of our service period. They've got it,
Yeah.
So
that sounds like reasonable care, right?
It is. That's active managerial control. And that's what we're striving for. But when you walk into a place and you find something like that that's out, and you're approaching them with like, hey, this cooler's not working right, and you just get this deer in the headlights sort of a look. They're like, really? Like, how?
Well, it's because the line cook doesn't want to tell you, yeah, it's been like that for 4 weeks. We've been asked for getting it, get it fixed, and it hasn't been. So they don't know what to say, man. That happens too,
And maybe that's it.
Listen, you're dealing, and the reality is, man, and you're dealing with a singular owner in most of these independent operations, right? You're dealing with one person who's responsible for the livelihood of all these people. A $5,000, $3,000 repair is sometimes insurmountable, especially in tough times like this, right? So they're sometimes in a pickle.
It can be.
Yeah. But to your point, this whole notion of active managerial control, and I absolutely love that, and I guess maybe could you unpack that a little bit? In that instance, it's like they come up with a contingency plan, like plan A is not working, but this is what we've done with plan B, right? Ooh. So what other instances of active managerial control? Because it's a big one, right?
It's just about having control of the facility and just understanding what's going on and stuff like that. So if they're having that cold holding unit problem, but they can explain to you what it is that they're doing to, effectively remediate that situation, then they have control over what's going on.
Right. That has to make you feel good.
Yeah. If I walk into a place and that's the issue, I'm not even writing up that they've got a problem because they're on top of it. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. most often, most of the time when you go in and there's a problem and you point it out, then they fix it. If something needs to be discarded, they discard it, or they put it on ice, or they move things to a properly working cooler and all that. And the problem gets taken care of. It's just funny how you go into some places and they're very on top of things, and then other places they're very, very relaxed about it. And it's far and few between the number of times you go in and they're really on top of it. Most of the time you're telling them, hey, you got a problem here.
So what's a significant difference there for the operators listening in is you just said you have some operators that are absolutely on top of it. You have other operators that are way laxed. Do you think it's a matter of discipline, or is it a matter of education, or a matter of knowledge, or what do you think it is mainly that causes that sort of behavior?
It's just a little bit of everything. I wish I could put my finger right on it, because if I could solve the problem. I mean, I can't. If you have employees go around and fill out temperature logs every morning, well, that's only as good as the person filling out the temperature log. You forget to fill them out, or you just don't even take the temperatures. You just fill out the log because it's something you're supposed to do. So yeah. Maybe it is more of an educational thing, and maybe that's from the owners need to do a better job, or the manager needs to do a better job of impressing the importance upon those employees. And it's not, nobody gets in trouble for the cooler not working right. And sometimes, those kitchens, they're awfully hot. So when I open that cooler door relative to the temperature of the kitchen, it feels cold. So sometimes it could be as simple as, maybe they don't have the thermometer in the cooler where they can easily read it. Whereas if that thermometer were right up front, when the line cook opened the cooler door, he'd see that it's really at, 48 or 50 degrees and not 41 degrees. But when the kitchen's 105, the cooler feels cold.
Right. Well, that's an important thing too. There is obviously the relativity in the temperature thing, but where to keep your thermometers in a cooler, right? Everybody's always blown away. Like, don't trust the reading that's built in the machine. Like, put that thermometer in the warmest part of the cooler, because that gives you the worst case scenario, right?
Right up front and up high.
That's it.
Don't bury it behind stuff. When you open the door, you should be able to see it.
Yeah.
But most of the time they're not. They get knocked off, or they get shoved to the back, and then before you know it, you're walking in and the cooler's at 55 degrees, but it feels cold because the rest of the kitchen's 112.
Yeah, that's so true. My wife always wonders why I can wear a hoodie in the summertime and not have a problem, It's like my body's still acclimated to that climate, right? Like right. I can handle the hot. And funny, I don't do well in the cold, oddly enough, right? Like, I guess it should be no surprise. I worked in a tropically greasy environment for a really long time, right? Like, the cold's not for me, man. But the hot I can take all day. Right?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
So, yeah. And going back to what you said is I think is important. And the state's done a pretty nice job. I think it's unclear. Maybe you could clarify that for us. But, the state mandates that you have folks in your operation that are trained at the Ohio level 2 level, or the ServSafe or their competition, that food safety manager level, right? And then they add on the Ohio level 2, and then they have the PIC. Can you kind of unpack those to clarify?
Sure. So all risk level 3 and 4 facilities have to have that person that's manager level trained, or they have to get the certificate from the Ohio Department of Health for the manager level training. You have to have an individual that's available. That person doesn't necessarily need to be on site, but they have to be available.
Right. So I think they put it as on payroll, right? They got to be on payroll.
Exactly. And it's supposed to be, you're supposed to have one person per risk level 3 or 4 facility. So,
and what does that mean? Can you describe that real quick?
Yep. If I'm an owner and if I have 3 restaurants and each of those are risk level 3s, then with the way that code is written, I need to have 3 people that have that manager level certification. Say that I necessarily agree with that, but that's the way the code is written. And I think the way they wrote that, and the reason they wrote it that way, was because they I suppose they had to draw a line in the sand somewhere.
Andrew, I always equate it to the speed limit, right? Because you know that if you set the speed limit at 40, what are people going to drive? 45, 50?
Well, for sure.
Right? And if you set it at 45, they're driving 50, 55, right? So if the health code's not super strict, then people are going to slough off, even if it is super strict. So I think the people who are writing these codes understand that, because in someone who teaches serve safe and always food safe, I look at some of these measures and I think in the middle of service, how in the hell would anybody keep up with these regulations, right? But it clicked one day and I knew they're setting expectations up here, understanding you're going to come in just a couple notches lower, right?
There's some fudge factor built into some things.
Fudge factor. There you go, buddy. There you go. Love it. Thank you.
But getting back to the risk level 3 and 4, that manager level training, I think the reason that it's each risk level 3 and each risk level 4 is you have, that way, let's say I'm a regional manager for a large, chain. I couldn't say that I'm that guy that has that training, because I'm really not, I'm not in each of those facilities, each day or maybe even each week. But if I was a local restaurant owner and I had 3 facilities, I'm easily in those facilities probably multiple times per day. And I'm just a phone call away if there's any problems. Well, when they write the code, they can't take all those scenarios into consideration. So they just say every risk level 3 and every risk level 4. So with the person in charge training, that's the one where you have to have somebody on site at all times, each shift that has that training. That person in charge class, it's a couple of hours. You can get the thing online for $12, $15, $20 tops. Right. And I think that that's really good. I would encourage every restaurant owner to spend that $20 on as many employees as you can, because
make it part of orientation, right?
Yeah, those are the nuts and the bolts things that you're going to be telling your employees all day long. The stuff that you keep telling them that they got to do.
Right, like not to cross-contaminate or to hold things out of the temperature danger zone, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
I think the takeaway here is we always look at these trainings, whether PIC or manager, we look at them as we're checking requisite boxes, but we don't look at them like they're an investment in our team, right? And what I see now in the classes I teach is that there's a lot of owners, and thank God this is becoming a trend. A lot of owners are looking for ways to invest in their professional development of their staff, because we know turnover is an issue. They're trying to create a better workplace climate, better workplace culture. So they look for professional development. Like, okay, if I do these folks a favor, if I get them some education, get them some certification, that helps their confidence, that helps their expertise. I'm investing in them. They see that it's good juju back and forth. So I'm seeing operators now not waiting. And I just did a small restaurant group recently where they had 5 people from the same store get the food safety manager training, right? 5 people. And the store only does about 1.2 million a year. So it's not a large staff. But now within that small location, I think 4 passed the first time, and then we had to recertify one or retest one. So they have 5 people with food safety manager in a restaurant that only does 1.2 million a year. It seems excessive, but I absolutely love it. I think it's
I think
good
that's
stuff.
Fantastic. Now you're an instructor, so you've taught ServSafe.
Once or twice.
Okay. And there's the person in charge class. So I don't know if you guys also do one of those, or if you've ever sat through one of those online or anything.
I have.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't teach it because I don't think it's fair money making. I think it's so easy and so convenient to get and so cheap. I don't feel that they need an intermediary for that, right? Like, just go straight to the source and get it done for $15
right.
And you're good.
Right. But I guess when I'm looking at those 2 classes, for the bulk of the people that are out there, the nuts and the bolts of that person in charge class, and bang for your buck, if I were giving advice to a restaurateur, then I would say put every single one of your staff through the person in charge class versus the manager level training class. Because that manager level training class, with the way that code's written, I have daycares that have to take that class. Well, what do they need to know for how long and for how cold I need to freeze a piece of fish so that I can eat it raw? I mean,
right.
Who cares? Nobody does that. You buy it in that way already done. There's a lot of things in that manager level training that I think are good, but I think a lot of that's covered in the person in charge class.
Gotcha.
I wish that manager level training class would concentrate on the PIC stuff, maybe expand on that a little bit, and then really go more into the active managerial control stuff and explaining or help to explain to folks when they're in a situation when they to help them recognize that they're in a place that they don't want to be and where to go to get the information or how to resolve the issue. Not have you memorize a whole bunch of junk
Yeah.
uh,
That they're never going to use.
that they're never
Like
going to use.
I'm teaching shellfish tags to a pizza joint.
Exactly.
So let's get back to what restaurants can do now, this day and age.
Yep.
What are you seeing as the most overlooked aspects of the operation, and what advice would you give operators as far as how to I guess manage best practices? What are your like go tos as far as your 10 commandments, right, or 2 commandments or whatever you got?
Well, I mean, my number one really is the whole hand washing and bare hand contact. I mean, that's the top of the list. Cooling is something that I think is really, really important. So for the facilities that do cooling, that and you're having worked in the industry before too, you know that cooling is a lot more difficult than it appears to be. In most of these places, at night when it's beer 30 and you're trying to get people off the clock, right?
It's my favorite time of day.
Yeah, beer 30. And
Yeah.
The guys and the gals at the end of the night, they take that stuff, they wrap it up, they throw it in the cooler, and they walk out the door. And by morning time, the stuff's cold, but did it meet those time and temperature parameters that you need for proper cooling? They don't.
It took way more than 6 hours, right?
So I try to explain to people when I'm in there during the day, like, look, if you have things that you're going to regularly cool, like chili or a rotisserie chicken or something like that while you got the staff here during the day, run through your cooling procedure and make sure that it's meeting those time and temperature parameters.
Right.
And if it's not, then figure out what you need to do to make that happen. And then you write your procedures off of that. And then at the end of the night, you're telling your folks, hey, do it this way.
Right.
And then,
Well, and what's worse is they cool down that chili in the third pan, wrapped up, completely tented, right? So it's insulated with plastic on the top, so it's not breathing very well. And then the prep cook comes in the morning to that time temperature abused food already, and they don't take the time to take it out of the third pan and put it into a pot. You know what they do, right? They throw it right into the steam well, turn the steam well on, let that thing heat up over the course of 4 hours. So now you probably have about 10 hours in a danger zone in that particular item. So
right.
that 7-day shelf life is gone. Like, that stuff needs to be discarded.
Right. And they may not have even, they may have transferred that from the metal pan into a plastic one and further insulated it and created
Yeah. And that's something we don't think about a lot either, is the insulative properties of these materials, right? Where stainless steel is a decent insulator but a great conductor, and plastic is a terrible conductor but amazing insulator. I mean, it's going to hold all the cold in, all the hot in, right?
It is. It is.
Yeah,
on a side note, I don't know if you guys sell these, but I saw these at a facility the other day. Those 6 pans and third pans that are the insulated ones that you freeze. But these changed colors. So when they were frozen, they were blue. And then as they thaw out, they turn white.
Sounds like a Coors Light can.
I guess. I thought that was really cool.
No, that's awesome.
If you guys do equipment at Hillcrest, those
no, we don't, unfortunately. I mean, obviously we have access to it.
Those were cool.
Yeah, that's
most of the time you see those and they're already thawed. They're like, yeah, look, we got these great pans for holding stuff cold. I'm like, yeah, when they're frozen.
Yeah, no doubt. And go back to that cooling thing. It's not enough sometimes just to put, like, we would heat up a 5-gallon pot of chili and we would just throw that in our walk-in cooler, right? So not only do we have a 12-hour cooling time now, but then it also warms up the temperature of our cooler, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah.
We don't have to think about breaking it down into smaller containers to expose more surface area so it cools down quicker. And we actually have that 2-hour window to get down to 71. And then, the 4 hours to get from 71 to 41 or whatever the case may be.
Correct. Yep. Yeah,
right. All
exactly.
Good stuff.
At the end of the night, they just wheel it in there and then they shut the door. And by morning, maybe it's cold, maybe it's not. The day person probably just goes in there and takes a few scoops out, throws it in the pan, and then you said throws it in the steam table. Hopefully not, but I know that happens. First restaurant I worked in, I had somebody call off and you're busy because you're running around trying to get all your morning stuff done. And I specifically remember taking a big stock pot of soup, sliding it up on the flat top, and then periodically going by and giving it a stir, and then running around trying to get everything else done. So by 11 o'clock, it was lukewarm, but just a horrible plan. I don't know what I was thinking, but
Well, you weren't thinking. You didn't know, right?
I wasn't exactly, and I didn't
You
know.
weren't educated.
Having done that, I know that those types of things happen, and
Every day, all day.
every day because
Yep.
the industry what it is. Somebody calls off, all of a sudden you've got to take all these shortcuts that potentially could be very, very bad.
Yeah, and risky. And I think what we do is we say, okay, we succumb to instant gratification. Like, this is going to get me through the next 5 minutes. This is going to make sure that I get set up on time. But we don't look at the long game here, and we think, okay, but if I make 12 people sick because of this, I may not have a business to work with, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's a big issue. So
And
we got
maybe part of the
education we talked about. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that goes to the education point. Maybe some of those employees. I go to lots of places where, none of the staff they don't have any education at all. They don't have, any sort of a manual or any sort of any training whatsoever, other than some other line cook gave them the basics of what they were doing, and other than that, that's it. So,
Well, and that's a telephone game, isn't it?
yeah, it sure is.
Yeah, and you only learn what they learn. So we have the education, we have the hand washing, we have the cooling. What else? What else are the cardinal sins?
Those are really I would say those are the big ones.
Real quick, before we jump off here, I
Yes,
saw
sir.
something recently that I can't get out of my head, and I was wondering what you're thinking about this. I saw a local health department supply a restaurant with a pre-inspection checklist. Have you seen these before? And so it's almost like the operator can go around and give themselves a little bit of a health inspection, right? So they go around and they have their manager do this like once every 2-3 days, something like that, as part of their daily regimen. How do you feel about that?
I don't think that it's a bad idea. Um, I think that we had one of the folks here develop something similar to that. He was originally from out west, out in California, and they had a checklist kind of a thing. I know online I've looked up, manager, restaurant manager checklist, or restaurant, manager health inspection checklist, and you can find a whole bunch of different types of checklists to help you go through and are lights shielded, or this, that, and the other, and you can go down the checklist. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that you can use a tool like that as a good jumping off place, and then tweak that to fit your particular business. There may be things on those checklists that don't apply to your business, and then some things that you want to add that do. Those checklists, any type of checklist or record keeping, really is only as good as the person that's filling that form out. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think any tool that can, like, if I have a cooling log and I expect my employees to check the temperature in that cooler, or go in and temp a couple of food products and then record those on that log, I think that's a great tool, because that gets those employees then to go in and assess how that unit's doing, and to check those things. But if my employees decide, I don't feel like it, and I'm just going to write down that I temped the coleslaw and the chicken, unless I'm standing there watching them do it, was that log a good thing or not?
Right. No,
So
and we deal with that all the time, but it really comes down to that training and accountability piece, and
right.
that
So I
active
think
managerial control, and all these things lumped into one, right? It takes a village.
Right. So those checklists and those tools, I think they're all good. They take time, and sometimes restaurants don't. That's something a lot of places are short on, is time and staff.
Yeah.
And so I
Right.
can give them all kinds of tools and all kinds of paperwork and all kinds of junk and boxes to check and stuff like that. But if you're bare bones and you barely got enough people to get the place open and keep it running, you sure don't have enough time to sit down and fill out 4 hours worth of checklists. But I think
Right.
they're good. They have their place.
Right.
For-
So really what it boils down to is just master the basics, right? Just make sure you're checking the big boxes we talked about before, the hand washing, the hygiene, the educational piece, that sort of stuff, right?
I think so.
All right, beautiful, man. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to spend some time with us and help the independent operators out there. We appreciate it greatly, man. Can't thank you enough.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right, my man. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.
This is a high quality pod. Thank you, everybody.
Take care. Adios.
Thank you for listening to Restauranttopia. The gratitude that we have for each and every one of you spending your precious time to listen to this podcast is immeasurable. Please make sure to tell a friend about this podcast. And also, if you have any feedback for us, visit us on restauranttopia.com and drop us a line. You can also subscribe on your favorite place to listen to podcasts. Thank you and have a great day.
We are excited to announce the Restauranttopia VIP Text Club. Join by texting the word podcast to 844-928-4257. You will get access to exclusive content, industry news, deals, announcements, pro tips, and more. The VIP Text Club is an exclusive community of independent restaurant owners and professionals. Join today. Message and data rates may apply. Please check our website for our terms of service and privacy policy. We also want to thank our sponsor, Hillcrest Food Service. If you are a local independent restaurant and are looking for a distributor who has chef and operational consulting, provides marketing support, does menu reviews, and most importantly, wants you to be successful, reach out to Hillcrest Food Service at hillcrestfoods.com.